In this video, we're going to look at comparing UI and UX. So in the earlier video, we talked about what UI is and what UX is, so user interface and user experience. We talked a little bit about the differences between them, and that user interface is all about the interactions and the components and the interfaces that exist. And then user experience is more around emotions, or mostly emotions that people have when interacting with your app. So if we look at comparing the two and we think about the discipline in itself, if we look at UI designers versus UX designers, what's the difference between these people? So UI designers in general, and this is generalization, but in general are maybe artists who have a technical knowledge. They have a background in design. They understand the visual aspect of how colors go together, how things should be laid out on the page. They also help to convey brand identity. So they have an eye for brand and understanding of how those things work. And then they guide users with visual elements. So they're able to design components and things that fit in your application or on the screen that help guide users through the system, through your application. So then how does that differ to UX designers? Well, if we look at UX designers, they're more concerned with people and their behavior. So why would somebody do this? Why would they come and want to use this part of your application? And then they determine how users interact with the system. So once they study people and their behavior, and they understand the reasons why people are maybe coming there or wanting to interact with this element and the behaviors they have around that, then they can help determine maybe how those users interact with your system. So it's a deeper knowledge of the hows and the whys people are using your app, whereas the UI is more of a visual. We want to make sure that it's easy to use instead of, is it actually doing the things that we want it to do? So why do we combine UI and UX? Well, it's kind of self-explanatory. Good UIs are required for good UXs. So if you want a good user experience and you want people to have a good emotional experience with your application, you kind of have to make sure that the UI is there and that it does a good job and it creates that good user experience. And then on the other side, good user experiences help create good UIs. So it's kind of difficult to wrap that into something simple, but the idea is that if there's a good user experience and you're able to define that, and that the experience is something that's easily studied and you can determine how people want to use your system, then it's easy to develop the UI around that. So what this means is that both of these disciplines have to work together, because your app or your system would be unusable or would not be very usable or would not have a lot of users if it didn't have both. It could have a user experience that's, well, if you think about it, a good user experience, a bad user experience, a good UI won't make up for that really, because they'll still have a bad experience. So the two of these things need to work together to create this synergy to make sure that your application is as good as it can be and that does what people want it to do.